Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Smith, and I'm Vice President for Internet Television at NVIDIA. We help enterprises, networks, and multiple system operators prepare content for any screen, anywhere. Today, I'm joined by a stellar group of industry experts who will help offer insight and guidance on their video workflow, products, and architecture. In this session, we'll explore the complexities in preparing media elements, file and live linear channels for a multi-screen environment. It seems like it was just 18 months ago, in fact, I'm sure it was, that we were calling our delivery targets 3-screen environments and defining strategies against that notion. What a great way we've come in a short time. Confident in saying that 3 screens have now become N screens. In fact, if you're up to date on trends and consumption patterns, mobile platforms and media consumption therein will skyrocket in the months and not years to come. So as you may be aware, though, preparing content for the multitude of screens is really no simple task. It reminds me of a question I was asked years ago while at Yahoo, which was, Matt, what's the universal codec? I promptly laughed and told him that there wasn't one. There's not one in existence, but the commonality of H.264 and AAC codecs in all 3 of the major delivery formats appear to have eased some of those requirements. So let's find out. Let's dive in and talk to our panel here. Joining us today, again, are a great group of industry experts who can help us understand the complexity in these workflows, the challenges that they face, what they're thinking, and some of the solutions that they're exploring. So I'm going to introduce them one by one and ask them to tell you a little bit about them and what they do in their business. So first, here is Jamie Sherry, who's Senior Product Manager for CDN at Level 3 Communications.
Hello, everyone. I'm a product manager in the CDN services space at Level 3. For those of you who don't know, Level 3 does quite a bit of things, and that includes content delivery for content owners and publishers. And specifically, I work on a variety of things, including our Flash network, as well as the emerging adaptive bitrate formats. And Level 3 is a unique position to offer services, especially around live, where we have the ability to do signal acquisition and live encoding, so we offer kind of end-to-end solutions for live streaming as well.
Thank you. And next, Joe Einstein, Vice President of Production Services from AEG Digital Media right here in LA.
Hello. AEG Digital Media is sort of the content enabler. We handle downlink acquisition, sort of end-to-end project management around award shows, music festivals, large entertainment events, as well as in the 24/7 market.
Thank you. Next, Cyril Rickleton-Abney, who is Senior Director of Content Security and Piracy Management from Turner Broadcasting.
Hi, I'm Cyril. I am part of Turner Broadcasting. I look after content protection and anti-piracy there, from the script to the screen. On the Turner front, I am part of the audience and multi-platform technologies group that fuel most of the Turner brands anytime and everywhere, like delivery of like content and things, as well as CNN, but as March of Madness, Black on Demand, and many other of our properties.
Thank you. And last and certainly not least, Robert Longwell is here. He's Vice President of Video Operations for Digital Media at the Disney ABC Television Group. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Robert. I oversee the facility, workflow, and process for delivering ABC Network, ABC Family, SoapNet Network, delivering episodic content and short-form content to abc.com, abcfamily.com, soapnet.com, even oscar.com sometimes. And we also are responsible for electronic sell-through deliveries and whatnot to iTunes, Xbox, PlayStation, Amazon, Netflix, Verizon Wireless, YouTube, Mobi TV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In our facility, we pump out about 100,000 files every month, and that equates to about 15 terabytes of data, which is a very large increase compared to where we were just a few short years ago.
So with that intro, it's a great opportunity for me to jump on that, Robert. With that proliferation of devices and consumers of Disney ABC content, how do you design a workflow? What do you have to think about in terms of the multitude of screens that exist out there as you design a workflow? Like, talk to us about the complexities that you face every day in getting out shows like Desperate Housewives.
I'll say that first we're kind of fortunate in that we saw this kind of coming years ago. Back when we were, at the time, like 5 years ago, we were abc.com only, and wireless was kind of the next big thing for ABC to tackle. And we kind of came at a crossroads that either we can keep hiring more people to help shepherd all the files and all the new devices and things that we expected to come out, or we can automate the process. And thankfully we chose the latter. We chose to automate it. And today, we have a very small 3-man kind of technical operation team that helps build this process. And not saying that we have all the solutions clearly at this point, but today, tackling a new device, a new transcode format, it's not as complicated as it used to be. Like I said, I still don't think we have all the answers because there's always a new device and a new codec and a new platform coming out. But today, it's all centered around our automation.
Joe, what about you? I mean, same question. So your customers are varied, right? A lot of different types of customers ask you and your team to deliver rich media events for them. What are some of the things you have to think about when you think about mobile devices, tablets, PC, Mac, set-top box, or a Roku type device? What are the things you have to think about when you design a workflow for an event?
So I think around our biggest challenge is time frames. Robert gets to work on implement the process once and churn out the content every day. The client comes to us and says, I want to deliver Coachella, and I want to deliver it on 3 different streams on 7 different devices. Our biggest challenge is, we have about 60 days typically to turn up that service for them. The desktop experience is relatively straightforward. The mobile connected device market is changing so much that for us, there are updates to phones, updates to devices. It's a constantly evolving and always in development process with network changes, device changes, and codec changes. I think that's our biggest challenge around delivering to those devices.
Jamie, what about the CDN perspective? I mean, you're a little more static than what Joe just described, but as you think about how to generate multiple different renditions, I think Robert said it's probably gotten a little easier, right? So we're over some of the biggest hurdles, but what are some of the things that you guys have to think about delivering this content on the public internet?
So it's very similar to Joe's situation. We have many customers. We're not one customer doing things statically. Might consider it a little more static, but the reality is that every customer wants something different, and so we tend to focus on the devices first, and we pair it back to whether it's live or on demand, the quality levels that they want to experience on those devices. And then you think about some of the workflow stages that are common, like preparation and protection, and you look at their business models, and you kind of bring it all back together in terms of the services we offer to make sure that it's satisfying their requirements.
Okay. Robert, back over to you. You talked about how this has gotten a little bit easier, but are you having to create more renditions today than you were 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Has it gotten more difficult, easier in general?
I'll say that it seems that everyone, I'm talking the Xboxes and the iTunes and the Amazons kind of the world, they are starting to normalize a little bit. Everyone's starting to ask for a very similar file type and file codec. But even when they ask for the same codec, it's a different bit rate. So there's no amount of sharing basically in our workflow. If I'm making a format for an iPad or for our own site or an Amazon, it's all different files. There's basically very little sharing among all of them. Everybody wants something different.
So adaptive bitrate has helped us deliver better viewing experiences for the user, but I've heard some people say that it's made the problem worse, right? It's exacerbated these issues, especially in the CDN space. James?
I always talk about the fact that, the codec world got simpler with H.264 and AAC, and then the container world's just fragmented again. And you add to that fact as well the notion that adaptive bitrate has an extra preparation stage where you've got to actually either fragment it in the Apple sense or prepare to fragment it for the other two formats, the leading formats. So I agree it's gotten more complex, but what we try to do is encompass ways in our solutions to make it as simple for the customers as possible. And I also think that, I think, Robert, you said it, that you're getting more to a consistent set of quality levels across all the devices, and you're getting to that point where you can kind of pick and choose across those and reuse where you can, and whether it's in live or on demand. And it's getting there, it's not there yet. So
From a pure file perspective, I think people in the audience might appreciate this. I've heard people say that in the CDN business, adaptive bitrate has created some pretty unique problems in that we've got all these, small little chunks of files that are scattered everywhere. Is it as pronounced as people have said?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest one to look at is Apple, and you're pre-creating those fragments, and those small objects moving around the CDN isn't as efficient. We've come up with ways, though, for the Microsoft and Adobe formats to make it easy to move the big files around and then do the fragmentation where it needs to happen. So we've found ways in certain cases to make it more efficient.
So I touched on it in the introduction, but the commonality in most of these major streaming formats may have created opportunity in that we can look at encoding or transcoding differently and do things in the network, right? Some CDNs are exploring this. And Joe, I'm interested in your perspective. Is that common encoding something that you're looking at? Is that helpful? And if so, how does it help?
Right now on our normal events, we're generating 8 to 10 different encodes and then rewrapping those 24 to 36 different ways for Android, iOS, desktop, whatever the devices are. So on a large event, we're pushing 200 to 500 megabits out of our encoding facility data center into the CDN. And that's just on one event. So if we've got 4 events running over a weekend simultaneously, we're pushing 1 to 2 gigabits per second. If we can get the eight encodes into the CDN and then rewrap those at the edge or in some intermediate, we're going to save a lot of egress bandwidth from our facility into the CDN and probably a lot of setup and complexity on our side.
So to recap, what Joe's talking about is being able to generate a file rendition when the request happens on a network as opposed to storing many, many, many files. James, interested in a CDN perspective there?
Yeah, no, I agree with the approach. The number one reason we would do those types of solutions is bandwidth constraint at the event site. So saving you cost is important as well, but when it's definitely something that they have to do, then bringing those quality levels in as sort of mezzanines and then doing the transformations as necessary for the devices in the network is definitely the right direction.
So Cyril, interested in your perspective, we're beginning to see more and more TV everywhere happen, where we have more live linear channels that are offered to people at any time on any screen. From a piracy and a rights perspective, how important is it for us as an industry to get these solutions in place? Or are we there yet?
We're halfway there. I've heard about codecs, about formats, about ways to just send content, but you have to add as well another layer to that equation or another axis, which is the security around this whole content. There is a way different way to protect content if it's a free-to-air kind of ABC type content, for which you have some regulations in which you cannot prevent things to be recorded or copied, versus an HBO type of content that is a $50 a pop kind of boxing game. And for this, there's on one hand, there's the rights management aspect of things that many people tend to dislike, but there's as well the anti-fraud or piracy management, which is how do you make sure that one user and only one user is accessing this piece of content. So that adds to the complexity of the whole equation on the server side, on the prep side, on the delivery side. Then if you add to this the fragmentation in terms of devices, there is no silver bullet today. There's not one kind of codec plus rights management plus event that will work on all devices. There are some trends, there is the HLS like codec that is, as a trend, tends to be adopted by more and more like people. But if you want your piece of content to be on like iOS and on web like browsers and on like Android devices, you might have to like fragment 3 times your like production of like content because of the rights protection asked from the content owners and the lack of unified like approach through all of the devices. And that is actually extremely visible in the like Android ecosystem that has multiple OS, multiple like versions, hardware-only set of like solutions, no real like API and things like this.
Is there a silver bullet, or are we just faced with a fragmented delivery methodology?
Every single vendor I speak to seems to be selling the kind of silver bullet, almost there, maybe next month. But we will face some form of like fragmentation for quite some time. And then at some point we might get everything working together, but we're not there yet. So for the next few months, there's a need of a like tactical kind of like approach in which we go almost on a device by device, type of content by type of content. And then in the future we might have that kind of broad view, and one size does like fit all, but it's like not there yet. And there are so many steps there that can make that.
So Joe, similar question to you. Your organization produces hundreds of live events every year. Is rights protection or is rights management a requirement today, or is it something that you think is going to become more prevalent as we have more live linear channels that people can consume anywhere, anytime?
On most of our ad hoc event-based business, it's not an issue currently. On some of our corporate business, DRM and security is. I think we're going to see a big uptake in the 24/7 TV Anywhere market in the next 12 months.
So DRM is going to become a requirement. So follow on then, HLS or Apple's HTTP live streaming is probably the most popular or most deployed streaming technology today, yet we lack DRM. How big a challenge is that for you, Joe? Or do you see it? Do you see it being a challenge? Is it a gap that we need Apple to address?
It's a gap that I think if it was addressed, HLS would be used on many more of our events because it has the security piece wrapped in. It's prevalent on most of the devices, and every one of our clients wants to hit the iOS market.
Cyril, our resident privacy expert?
It's
Or piracy, I said not privacy, piracy.
Privacy management. Like HLS, where to just deliver seems to take more and more space, but it's not like DRM just encrypted. There are like issues there with just the way keys are like delivered. There are issues with some like securing like tokens. There are a few like issues there. It's been accepted for TV content, and even with that, you can that's that same kind of slider. If you go with like TV content, which is in the free-to-air window, you can add more like freedom basically to the like content distributor versus a high like level kind of piece of content. Again, like HBO game. So you can as well slide that with the resolution of the content. So to like iOS devices, it looks great when it's SD to these devices, and that tends to be accepted by some of the studios. For premium content, it might not be like the case. So you might then need a stronger wrapper, or a better way to just protect the content through like HLS.
Can conditional access solutions help that, like the Widevine and the Verimatrix and secure media type of elements? Does that lower the bar across all of the streaming formats?
So funny enough, if you today speak to most of these vendors, they all have their own flavor of like HLS. All of them. Different specs of different like versions of the draft specs are used. Some use the 3rd, some use the 5th, some use the 6th. We're at the 7th, and a few things are there, a few things are just like missing. But I might be wrong, but I don't think that anyone has the exact specs perfectly proved and allocated yet. And if there is, please let me know. take it.
Robert, follow up on that one is, what does that mean to Disney ABC? You obviously have to secure some of your content. Is conditional access something that you consider, or is it really technology-specific rights management?
I'll almost have to defer that one. It falls outside of my workflow.
Fair enough.
We deliver the content, we process the content, we deliver the content. We have entire teams that are more. We got part of the team here, actually.
So I'll ask you a different question then. So, fair enough. So when you mentioned earlier a new handset coming online and how you think about that, do you look at them all equally? Are there one or two prevalent operating systems that you plan for? Is it because it may be different here in North America than Europe, right? Europe's still a very Nokia-driven continent. Media strategies there are somewhat fragmented. What's it like here? Is it really an iOS and Android world when it comes to preparing all of your different content for mobility?
For our workflow, actually, we're only on the iPad app at the moment, so we're not on Android and we're not on iPhone, although iPhone's iOS. So right now, from a content preparation perspective, just making an HLS-based version of our episodes, not particularly complex. It's still taking an MP4 or whatever that we would have already prepared anyways. The exception here being that, of course, again, it's another screen, so it's another bit rate, it's another size. So it is an MP4 that's been transcoded specifically for the iPad, and then it's just running it through the Apple, segment.
So Jamie, same question is, how does level 3 view that? I mean, you've got a global business, but do you look at it differently by region? Does the mobility questions vary by geography to level 3?
Mobility and formats in general do vary by geography. I think the further east you go in the world, some of the older formats persist, and we actually have a growth in Europe in Windows Media, for example. And a lot of it has to do with set-top boxes and things like that support that format, but over here it's vastly different for both smooth streaming and Windows Media. The majority is the iOS platform, and then Flash over in North America, and then there's a bit of Android, but that's pretty small still too.
Interesting perspective. So Joe, similar question then. I think Jamie touched on something that's interesting. It's probably very prudent. As our mobility speeds increase with LTE deployments, 4G or whatever you want to brand name it, are we going to be able to repurpose the same streams that we would for mobility for a little black box on top of the set or an IP connected set? You think that's going to become part of your workflow mentality in the next 18 months or so?
We're doing it today. Our typical spread of bit rates ranges from 150K up to 2.5, 3.5 megabit. I think we're going to start to see the 8 to 10 encodes we do now increase to 12 to 14 as we start to increase those devices. Right now, we can get all the Android devices, tablets, phones, iOS, iPads and iPhones and desktop into that 8. We're starting to make compromises. But I think the total encodes is going to increase over the next 18 months.
Increase. So we'll have to offer more data rates.
I think so, unfortunately.
I think I hear that every year at this show. I hear that, when are we going to reduce them? When are we going to reduce them? That's interesting perspective. So Robert, back over to you. You create a huge amount of content every day or every week, every month that you touched on earlier. Earlier I touched in brief on the concept of network media processing, where you can generate a file rendition at the time it's requested, and even use a caching layer to kind of help offset the delivery of that on a media net or a CDN. Is that an approach that you think that you consider, or is it really what they call a hits-driven world, where you're going to have to encode 17 renditions of Desperate Housewives?
Yeah, I'm already making 25. I think that's maybe maybe a better solution and a bigger need for live, I'm on demand. So I'm usually processing 1 to 2 days in advance. So I don't have that bandwidth constraint that a live program is necessarily going to have. But at the same time, we're still paying for the pipe, right? There's still a considerable price to pay for that pipe, and anything we can do to squeeze out, just that much more, and then allowing me to continue to deliver larger mezzanine files, because the mezzanine files are what eat up most of the pipe versus the consumer deliverables for HLS or whatnot. Anything that'll allow me to, get that much more delivered to the mezzanines would be helpful.
Cyril, what about you from a protection standpoint? Does that make sense, packaging files with protection at runtime as opposed to creating all these files with DRM already applied?
Well, there are some efforts these days, like around that common encryption scheme in which you would encrypt all of your files in a kind of like similar way, or actually with the same encryption like method, and then depending on which device you're on, which kind of like platform, depending on that runtime, you'd have hooks in some rights like management modes that would be able to like decrypt like the content, which is what we see in DECE, which is what like Disney did like define with like key chest. And so having the content pre-encrypted with that would like make sense. Again, because of the way of the like fragmentation, the way of the like difference of like deliveries, you can either deliver these days to a like consumer, you can then deliver to an MVPD, like an MSO. It can be VOD, it can be live. If you start, having multiple paths for the delivery, having everything wrapped with the same keys might be then like an issue there. So you have to then have multiple instances, multiple like versions, and that again adds some just complexity to the whole like effort.
Okay. So last but not least, pretend, if you will, panelists, that there are product managers in the audience, hint, hint, from Adobe and Microsoft and Apple. If there are things that you could tell them today that are either great or that are lacking in their product, what are a couple of those ideas? Jamie? What do we need in these products? What are some of the things that you'd like to see?
I think in the Apple side, it'd be interesting to see if, everybody it's surprising how it's taken off being just a spec. I think if there were more interaction between Apple, and there is with certain companies at certain levels, but more interaction on that could maybe help further the success of that format. I guess you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen there, but on the, I think the smooth format for the traction that we see in the country is surprising because I think it's a really good format. It's got a robust DRM behind it, so it's interesting to see how that's progressed. And Flash is, I'm sure they're in the room or not, but Flash is a love-hate and it's been for a long time. I got flooded with calls when 4.5 came out, and the calls were about whether we, as a company, supported Apple. And the reality is we've been doing Apple for 2 years, and the rewrap capability of the new server is something I think that is impressive, but I would refrain, hopefully, from people thinking that rewrap is the savior to everything. We already have customers who are, unhappy with rewrap from a perspective of, I think a codec range, or a bitrate range rather, if you're going from very low to very high, you need to keep the audio quality. And this is more of an adaptive thing rather than a rewrap, but with rewrap you cannot change those properties. So you have this low end, high end. Your high end is HD, and you are stuck with typically an unacceptable audio quality level. So it's not something from what I understand, the smooth format doesn't have this issue. I'm not saying it's a flaw in Adobe's format, but there are things around the messaging I think that could be a little more clear, but business is business. So,
Joe, any thoughts there?
I think I agree with everything you said. I think the one thing that's made our business very successful is taking everything that the broadcast industry has learned over the past 50 years and applying that to the digital delivery, webcast, whatever you want to call it, market. So some big things that are hitting us now is time code into the streams and this whole ad marker issue, whether it's it's 24/7 ad replacement for over the top, or it's ad markers in live events that are online digital delivery only. So I think taking a step back, looking at the product, and then saying, hey, here are the big missing pieces. Because if you took all the products and combined them, you could have the perfect product right now. But neither one of them are 100% there.
Cyril, any hot sports opinions?
Dear Mr. Apple, please give me secure key exchange in the like HLS like format. Thanks. That's my Christmas list. More seriously, on the like CDN side of things, actually, like as well, there's that like notion of secure tokens or authentication like token, and if we could get a bit of standardization between all of these, instead of you start with one and it's a token, you go to another, it's another token, and so that's a bit of just like an issue, and a bit of talking together would be great. And a set of defined profiles for the video, and then if we could get a silver bullet for everything else, I'd take it.
Robert?
My pain point would probably be a little different maybe than anyone else here is closed captioning. It's something, thank you very much. It seems like it's still closed captioning's been around for a very long time, but from a digital media kind of perspective, it still seems like it's very much in its infancy. And there's a lot of formats out there, and a lot of formats don't work with a lot of other formats. Or when you translate the formats, a lot of the data gets lost. But that's kind of the last few years, that's been kind of our biggest issues is dealing with closed captioning.
Okay. We have a few minutes left for questions. Happy to open up to the floor for some Q&A, if anyone has any questions. Hang on for the microphone.
What's that? How do we hear?
How do you QC 100,000 files a month?
I stay up very, very late.
Good answer.
We QC them as a new file first. I mean, we're basically a QuickTime ProRes shop. It's a 1080p asset. That's been QC'd to death. It's gone over and over several times. We don't QC every transcode. Clearly,
Okay.
we make 25 of them per show. There's no way to go through all those. We trust our transcoder.
Excellent.
Anyone else? One in the back there. Just wait for the microphone, just a minute. Are there one there?
You mentioned you're growing the number of streams from 10 to 14. What is the reason? What's the motive for that?
On the live side, typically it's different bit rates, different frame sizes, down to the mobile device, up to the connected device, all the way up to 720 and 1080 in some instances. So it's mainly frame sizes. Yeah, and then the bit rates that go along with it.
Okay, back in the corner.
Yeah, thank you. Recently, I was at Netflix and responsible for workflow there. We, as you probably are aware of, got slammed for closed caption. So I'm wondering if a gentleman from ABC can elaborate on that a little bit more. Specifically, is it about getting the source, or is it about coming up with the right sort of format and a standard for the output format for delivery?
It seems that there's a lack of standard across all the partners that we work with. From iTunes wants Scenerist, Amazon, I think a few others are leaning towards, and don't quote me, but I think they're leaning towards time text XML. We've got other partners that would prefer subrip. At the end of the day, they're all, it's the method and process of generating so many different formats. When we use Mac Caption to do a lot of our transcoding and getting that built. But even then there's limitations. I mean, time codes don't translate very well. Different formats, different, and then of course you're also marrying it to a video that's been transcoded in a separate workflow. So at the end of the day, you may end up with something that's 2 or 3 seconds short because you've chosen a different format. It would just be nice to, of course, like we want a single format for everything. It'd be nice to have a single format for closed captioning. Maybe it's a pipe dream, but I can have wishful thinking.
Over here.
Yeah, hi, my name is Andy Wong from Concurrent. I have a question. Quite a few of you mentioned that you have to support like multiple period resolution and also formats, wrapper. I'm wondering, in the industry, actually more than one company, a few companies already come up with this really on the fly, really high stream capable on the fly Transmax product. Where do you think it will help you at least, for example, you keep your bill rate and resolution, 8 of them, for example, then you don't have to times 3 for 3 different wrapping format. Do you think this will help you to reduce the amount of original content in the preparing the content for service?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, people have been, if you look at the on-demand workflow, people have been transcoding for 15 years, right? And they're pre-creating all these assets as the devices grow. They're creating more and more, as Robert said, more formats, more, as Joe said too, varying the resolutions and everything to hit all these devices becomes unwieldy. Wouldn't it be nice if you could take an MPEG-4 file, have it sit on an origin server, and then do its thing as it's requested? So yes, there are companies that do that. We know you guys offer a solution around that. We do some of that. We'll look at doing more of that in the coming year, and as an example. And yes, I think that it's a step in the right direction towards ultimately an end goal that is more efficient and effective and easy for customers and companies like us to deliver the content. I'll go back to saying though that rewrap to me is not the savior to dealing with hitting all your devices for the reasons I said, and I just think that it's important for people to realize that they should not hang their hat on rewrap. It's a nice direction towards something I'm a fan of, which is more like the SVC part of the H.264 codec where you're doing slices. And so I know companies deal with that too, and that I think is a little bit further out because you have a client issue, but it's a step in the right direction for sure. Yeah.
I think we might have time for 1 or 2 if anyone else has a question. All right, go ahead.
I'd like to pick up on this issue of SVC, the Holy Grail. And people have been talking about SVC for a while, but to your point, nobody is taking the first step towards ensuring SVC players being available. So from your perspective, everybody agrees that this is the right solution, yet nobody's taking the first step. Could you guys elaborate? So what's the issue here? Why is the industry not acting on something that makes a lot of sense?
There's money to be made in the ways it's done today, is what I think. Creating more derivatives, although storage is cheap, makes more storage dollars for me. And delivering it all uniquely, you might argue is the same revenue as you were doing it dynamically, but for us it's about value adds for us. So I see doing these types of things more and more, providing more value to the customers rather than saying, hey, go transcode your stuff, put it on our origin, we'll deliver it for you. That story is old and stale and everything. I mean, we need to continue to provide more value. So, but it's interesting. I've seen it comes back to a client situation, and the world of apps, your phones and everything, I think might change that perspective someday. Plugins are not as required. Apple's the great example, right? There's no plugin there. I mean, people are building apps to play that content. Apps are popular again, and so I think that direction might change that. The emerging format vendors these days have had SVC on their roadmaps. They take it off, they add it. So companies can create technology that sits in the network all they want, but if the client adoption isn't there, you're stuck. So someday maybe. That's my take.
Great. Thank you for coming, and please join me in thanking our panel for the great discussion.